Yeah, there was a case that we were working together on, Craig, where we had a business which had majority shareholders but also some minority shareholders, and part of the sale process was coming up against what's called the whitewashing provision. So I thought maybe if you could share a little bit about that and shareholders agreements as well. There was some unusual things in the shareholders agreement in that one.
Whitewashing is something that commonly gets forgotten in these sort of transactions. So what whitewashing is when a company is providing what's called financial assistance to the buyer for the acquisition of the company's own shares, that's effectively a potential reduction in the capital of the company, because there's less assets potentially available to satisfy the creditors, to satisfy the needs of the company. So what ASIC has is this whitewashing process where you have to effectively go through a process of making sure that the shareholders in the company are fully and fairly informed of what is happening with this security back over the company, and approving that process being undertaken. Now, the difficulty with that is that it's a time-consuming process. You actually have to, send notices off to ASIC, wait for things to come back, then you do a further set of meetings. And so it's something that people just don't take into account in their planning for the transaction. So they've got a deal, they've got a timeline, they're all set to go, and then they go, oh, hang on, there's this whitewash that needs to be done, and suddenly you're just going to lose a month if you haven't properly planned for it. So it is something that just really needs to be looked at and run through properly. And so if the business is ever being used as any part of the security, so we were talking about the vendor financing before, that would be a whitewash scenario. If it's a bank coming in and saying, we want a guarantee from the company, that's a whitewash scenario. So lots of things can be considered financial assistance. So you really need to just have a think about that basically whenever there's a funding arrangement that has anything to do with the company. And shareholders agreements, look, constitutions and shareholders agreements will basically govern what needs to happen when shares in the company are being sold. So you really need to get across what those things say, because the mechanisms can vary quite wildly. Some will have a right of preemption, which says someone selling has to offer the shares to the existing shareholders first. So even if you think you've got a great external buyer, you may have to run that offer through the existing shareholders first. You may have a drag and tag clause which lets you take those shareholders along for the ride if you find that external buyer. You may find that there isn't a right of preemption and the shareholders with the majority shares can do almost whatever they like, but that may then upset the minority shareholders, because the deal is that the majority envisaged may not be the deal that the minority shareholders thought they were getting. So it really is important to get across exactly what you're dealing with in terms of the shareholders agreements, to find out what sits there and what you're going to do about it. Because if you get 50, 75, 80% of the way through transacting a deal, and then you find out, hang on, there's other shareholders that have other rights here, it's going to cause a real problem.